Hi, I'm Jeremy. For my database project, I built the system to help manage hospital staffing pods. The real-world problem I'm solving is simple. An external document or care provider calls into the facility, and they know that they need to speak to the staff within the facility that manages cardiology or perhaps neurology. But they don't quite know who to call. They need a system that takes cardiology, finds the right pod, and gives a list of registered nurses or admin support staff, as well as the extension. So this would give a direct way to contact the first staff member who can help, without navigating an audio phone tree, punching in numbers in order to gain the correct person. So I used Microsoft SQL Server to help build this, but first, let's go take a look at the design. The schema diagram that I'm using, I made in Excel. And it's kept very simple with 3 tables. We have a staff table, which holds the employees. It has their ID, their name, how to contact them, as well as the assigned pod and the role they actually fulfill, be it a registered nurse or an administrative staff person. For the second table, it's pod assignments, which lists the physical locations and who manages them. And for the last table, care category, this is the lookup list. It tells us that cardiology belongs to pod 100. The relationships are straightforward, and staff who are assigned to to pod A, care category, the relationships are straightforward. Staff are assigned to a pod. A care category belongs to a pod, and a manager, who is also a staff member, runs the pod. I normalize this to third normal form, mostly to avoid typing the same location over and over. If pod 100 moves to the west wing, I only update it in the pods table, not on every single employee record. Alright, so now that we've reviewed this schema, we're going to go ahead and head over to the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. This is the software that's going to allow us to set up or build our database, the tables, the elements, and everything associated with it. Here on the left side of the screen is your Object Explorer, very similar to almost a file explorer. But we're going to go open a new query. And in here we're going to paste our script. And our script is basically the instructions to set everything up. So for step 1, we're going to create the database, if it doesn't exist. So we're going to look in the system to see if DBProject is there, DBProject being the name. And then we're going to begin. Next, we're going to go inside and drop the constraints. And this is a safety step. And the reason I have this in here is because I've actually already created these tables. So what we're doing is I'm writing over, but we can't write over tables. We have to do certain things to make sure that we can delete the tables. So some of the constraints that we have are the foreign key. And if we don't drop the foreign key first, we're unable to delete our table. So that's why we have these specific instructions. Once the foreign keys have been dropped, we can then drop the table itself. And now we can create the table from fresh. Each table starts by create statement. The table itself tells Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio to create or name the table which is next. And then we begin the specific elements within each table. And for the table pod assignments, we have pod number, and it assigns a data type, which is an integer. It says it cannot be null, and it also assigns this element as the primary key. For the second table under staff, we have employee ID, the extension, as well as the pod assignment. Now for the extension, typically a phone extension is just several digits, which would be an integer. However, because an extension is not commonly used to perform mathematical calculation, we're going to keep this as varchar, which basically it could be alphanumeric. And then finally the last table is care category. And once again, each element is assigned a data type as well as the table names, or excuse me, these are the elements, excuse me. And then finally, we're going to add the links, and the links is what connects our table. And if you remember in our schema diagram, it was either a blue or an orange line representing a foreign key or a primary key. And here is where we alter the table. And so the alter command, followed by the name of the table, tells which table we're going to alter. It adds the constraint of the foreign key, and it tells it basically which element of each table the foreign key is going to touch or connect. And so at this point, we will execute this. So now that the command has completed successfully, we're going to open this up, and we see DBProject as the database, and here at this point we see the three tables: care category, pod assignments, and staff. So the script is contained within the deliverable of the project, and you can see I had to be careful here. Managers are staff, and staff belong to pods, and so because of that, this technically is a circular link. So you had to create the tables first, and then add the data, and then finally link the managers back to the pods using an update statement. So we do have our tables created, and you can see them right here within the Object Explorer, but they're empty. For example, if we select and try to pull in any of the data that's in the tables, obviously we have no data. So at this point, we're going to insert the data. In order to do this, we're going to run a new query, and we have a pre-populated script. We will paste that in. And this script is what is going to feed data into our specific tables. So into pod assignments, we have our locations. And then we're going to also update pods with managers. And we do that since staff exists, we can link them back. Otherwise, this would be circular. The last step would be insert care categories. I'm going to go ahead and execute this. And we can see that the message is shown back. It tells us what has been affected. Now, to verify that we actually have data, we can open another query window, and on each table, we can right-click and select all, or the top 1,000. Since we only have about 10 rows per table, we will get that extent of data back. And so as we do this for each table, we can see that each table has data in it. Now, if you take a look at the script that was auto-populated by right-clicking on the table and selecting the top 1,000, you can see that this is telling it, hey, return to me the top 1,000 employees, names, extensions. Basically, it's saying populate all elements within the table with a return of data as it exists from the DBProject database, specifically the staff table. So this verifies all of our tables have data. Now that we have populated our tables with data, and you've seen from just a few seconds ago that we have at least 10 rows of data per table, we'll now go ahead and take a look at very simple queries. This first one we will use once again the built-in select the top 1,000 rows. However, what if you only wanted the first row? Obviously reduce that. What if you wanted everything within that table? Well, that would be select asterisk, and select asterisk is going to pull everything. So if there were more than 1,000 rows, obviously you would see more than 1,000 rows being returned within the results window down here. The next thing we can do is, using a select statement, we can go specifically looking for only specific people. So let's say we only wanted to see medical doctors. And so at this point, we'll modify our statement and get an error. So we got an error, but what I forgot specifically is I need to give it a constraint. I need to restrict where something is coming from. So obviously we're just going to type role because that's what we're looking for. And here you can see that we only want to see where the role equals MD, therefore we have 2 medical doctors. Now, if we wanted to verify that, all we have to do, comment out that line, hit F5 to refresh. Pulling in our data, we can take a look, and if we look at the roles column, this specific element shows us, and there, it's obviously we have 2 MDs. So if we uncomment this line and change the role to perhaps surgeon, hit F5 to refresh, and we can see we have 2 surgeons. One thing to know is if we change the case from surgeon uppercase to lowercase and then hit F5, SQL is not specific on case. So there we got a couple of select statements, and now from here we can move on to a join query. So why don't we go ahead and we will pull an inner join. And so we'll just select all and paste, and this is a script that I already signed, and as you can tell by my OCD type personality, I use a lot of comments so that we can specifically outline what is happening within the script. So this inner join shows staff names and the location of the pod they work in. In other words, it's connecting the staff data table to the pod assignments table. And when we hit F5 to go ahead and gather that result, we can very quickly see the employee name and the role, which is coming from the staff data table, is now being joined to the work location. The work location is coming from the pod assignments. So now SQL has taken our script and generated a nice look or view so we can see the name of the provider, the role that they play, as well as their work location. And so the next thing we'll do is we'll do an update and a delete operation. So we're going to do an update. So we're going to go ahead and select all, delete, and paste this script. So Peter Parker is one of our people, and you can see on our previous result, he is an administrative assistant and he works in audiology, but we're going to go ahead and update him. So at this point, we're going to hit execute. We are executing this update. So we are updating to the staff table that Peter Parker is no longer administrative assistant. He is now an office manager. And you can see under our table specifically, it is being reflected there. The final line is selecting everything from the staff table where the name equals Peter Parker, and therefore we only have one result because we only have one Peter Parker. And so the next thing is we're going to insert a dummy row. That way we can, we're going to demonstrate a delete task. But let's give it some dummy data. So we're going to insert into the care category table some information. We'll hit F5. Now, if we want, we can pull that back. And we're going to get from, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and do this the easy way. Care category. Select top rows, and here we have our temporary test category, line 13, and so that's what we just put in. Now in order to delete something, we gave it dummy data, so now we're going to delete the specific row that we just inserted. We're going to execute, then now we're going to go back to the care category, get the top 1,000 rows, and you can see we no longer have a line 13 because we just got rid of it. Okay? And so at this point, this concludes the project. It handles the data relationships cleanly, and it solves the specific business problem of connecting categories to staff. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this project. Once again, my name is Jeremy, and look forward to getting a great grade. Thank you, sir.